Welcome, everybody. This is Vandy here, and today is going to be my very first Kagurabachi Chapter deep dive. Today we are here covering Chapter 91, titled Natsuki. So jumping right into this one, it opens where we left off in last chapter with Hokuto from the Hishaku showing up, just popping up seemingly out of nowhere. Clearly this guy is insanely fast, because we already know that his sorcery has to do with like puppet creation and manipulation. So this seems to be just his speed that he's reinforcing with his spirit energy. Regardless, ever since he has been brought forward into the story, he is currently my favorite member of the Hishaku. Obviously, we don't know that much about his character, but we don't really know too much about any of the Hishaku so far. But just his demeanor, his vibe that he gives off, and the visual aspect, his character design, I think is fantastic. So it opens up with him immediately wanting to know where Uruha is, and right from the get-go, then he's even able to tell, like, oh, hey, you're Hakuri Sazanami. So I mean, obviously we know that the intel gathering ability of the Hishaku is extremely good, so he immediately was able to know that. And after basically pointing out that who Hakuri is, he was going for basically the kill right there. But luckily Kiri steps in, literally puts her foot on Hokuto's blade and, prevents him from potentially killing Hakuri, and immediately goes for a counterattack, and Hokuto blocks. So he's using some of that armor that he has, especially on like his left side, because it seems like his blade arm is his right. So he's using it to block. And he even says, like, oh, that was a weak attack. And Kiri was like, well, yeah, obviously it was used as a diversion. So it's not meant to be a powerful attack. And we know that she's still currently under the effect of the sorcery, like the demon lion heads, that seems to physically weigh you down the more you destroy them. So she's already not at full capacity right now because of that sorcery, and taking probably some of that damage from last chapter from that female Hishaku member, like stabbing her through her arm. And even though she dealt with her pretty quickly, I'm sure that plus the weight of that sorcery, she's clearly not functioning at full capacity. But that diversion does work, because Hakuri is going to use an ISO or an ISO shockwave, and Hokuto just straight up is like, bring it on. And just the dude just leans straight into it. And we've seen these attacks, like, I mean, they, even from someone like Hakuri, like it's an extremely powerful form of sorcery, especially when it comes to attack. And Hokuto, yeah, it gives him a nosebleed, but the dude doesn't even budge an inch. He just plants right into the ground and basically sends the shockwave back at Hakuri, sending him flying into the wall. And Hakuri even states that his output, like his power, it's not what it was, because he's already fired off 3 that day, like that's his third. But he's still like, that's crazy, the guy didn't even budge. So it seems to me like Hokuto seems, at least for like specifically for combat, he just seems like one of the strongest members of the Hishaku. Obviously he was sent to kill Ibuki, Natsuki's older brother, the previous wielder of the Cloud Gouger. And even though he wasn't, he wasn't in the, fantastic form that he was during the Seitei War. I mean, it says he lost his fangs and lost his edge. And even Hokuto says he doesn't like being basically recognized or given credit for taking out that Misaka. But, I mean, regardless, the guy, even if he got out of weight, out of shape and wasn't necessarily, had lost like his motivation, he was probably still pretty skilled with a blade. And Hokuto, obviously defeated him and said that he wasn't able to actually like go all out. So we know he's very strong, because then even Kiri states that he is crazy strong. And she is someone that is obviously within the Kamunabi, sees tons of extremely strong fighters. She herself is considered probably one of the elite troops, at least in the previous chapters when they talked about contacting all the elite troops. She was shown in one of the panels. But she even kind of starts to say, if I were in good condition, and it like tails off. I don't think that she would be stronger than Hokuto, but she is very, very strong, regardless of the situation. So she just kind of, he's still Hokuto's still trying to figure out where Uruha is. Sorry, I don't know why I'm having such a hard time saying his name right now, but he is just solely focused on finding him. And they're basically like, yeah, we're not going to tell you where he is. And he's going to basically go to kill her. And then we have a really awesome panel of Hakari. He's like up against the wall. And then all of a sudden, like a blade sticks out from the wall. Similar to, I like how Hokuzono has been doing these entrances for people. It's not like they just like come down the hallway. They like either come through, like Kiri came through the ceiling, like we saw her blade come through first and like cut that dude up. And then now we have Natsuki showing up, and his is a blade first through the wall, and then he kicks it out at Hokuto. So I just really like the entrances it's not just like them coming down the hallway. I think it's just Hokuzono just being creative and having fun with it, because he even has like a running gag with this other guy you'll see later on, who seems to be like Natsuki's like little assistant guy, about the destruction of headquarters and all of the walls and everything in there. But then we get to see Natsuki. We have this amazing panel of him saying like, you're dead, like I'm going to kill you. And because he obviously has his history with his brother being murdered by the Hishaku, and he also has this deep feeling, it seems to me, that he was left out of like the biggest things, because he wasn't selected as an enchanted blade user. That's why he has his little, I don't know what you call it, but vendetta against Uruha, and maybe even a little bit from his brother. But regardless, Natsuki is very cool. I do like his design a lot. I like his dual wielding of his blades, and he just goes right in on Hokuto, just attacking. And we get to see that, like I said, his little assistant guy, pops up in the hole in the wall and is like, Natsuki, like, you need to stop actively destroying the building. And Natsuki's like, got it, like, for sure, totally gonna make sure I don't destroy anything else. And I don't believe that for a second. And Natsuki goes on to like introduce himself to Hokuto and talks about how his older brother was Ibuki Misaka, the wielder of the Cloud Gouger. and basically is like, hey, I see that emblem and the fact that you're invading the headquarters, like you're Hishaku, right? And Hokuto doesn't even try to beat around the bush or play around. He's like, absolutely, like, here's my name. And then he has a little light bulb kind of moment go on where he's like, okay, I'm obviously the one who, defeated your older brother. You don't know that. So now I'm going to create a little situation here where I can get what I want out of you by dangling something in front of you that you probably want. So he's like, all right, let's make a deal. You beat me, I'll tell you who murdered your brother, even though it's him. It's literally him. But Natsuki obviously does not know that. And in exchange, he's saying, if I win, then you have to tell me where Uruha is. So, I mean, it's just interesting because even Kiri and Natsuki are just like, like, why Uruha? Like, why is this so, you're obsessed? He, ever since he showed up, it's like, where's Uruha? Like, that's who I want. Let's not beat around the bush. Tell me where he's at. And I really like Hokuto's explanation here where he talks about his sword, meaning I don't think he means literally just his sword. We know that his swordsmanship is like his sorcery with the puppet manipulation seems to be extremely good, because we had Hatshaku dude when a couple chapters ago say that his sorcery is extremely good, but what takes him to the next level is his ability with the sword. So he talks about that his sword, meaning I think like literally his swordsmanship and just his way of being and the way that he perceives battle, is that he didn't forge his blade merely just for survival, like just to be strong enough just to survive, just to barely eke his way through. He himself and his blade was designed for the thrill of deadly combat, being, thrown into the fire of actual combat where both of our lives are on the line, because that's when he believes that his abilities will truly shine. All the years of training can actually be used to its fullest, and that will bring gratification for him, because he's clearly in a position now where he is extremely powerful, and honestly most opponents are probably extremely boring. I mean, you're only ever able to use a small percentage of your abilities, and that is, pretty disheartening, because you spent so much time and effort on it, but you didn't realize that you were removing all your competition. So he feels like he basically can only get that sense of gratification from clashing and being against a master swordsman. So obviously he respects that title, which Uruha has along with Samura for the EI White Purity style. You would think that would include Itsuo Shirakai, the guy who actually, Kiri's grandfather, who actually developed the EI White Purity style. And we know him, like, yeah, he's old, but he even had stated that he got tired of fighting people and he disappeared off into the woods to apparently go try to fight some big bears or something. So I'm curious as to why Hokuto never tried to go find Shirakai and challenge him, considering that it seems to me that Shirakai had never actually met his match from people. And that's why he felt the need to, go test himself in different ways. So it's just interesting. But then again, maybe Hokuto had been training this whole time and only now in like our current timeline has he achieved like full completion of his abilities, and that's why he's seeking the opponents. I don't know. I think we're obviously going to find out more about him as time goes on. But I do also like the fact that Natsuki, Natsuki seems to have a chip on his shoulder, like I said, from what happened in the past with the Seitei War. But he also does make a good point where he's like, you're just seem to be purely focused on the big names of the past, but you're overlooking a master swordsman, right in front of you. Yeah, obviously referring to himself, which he seems to be fairly strong and proficient. And, he goes in for a blitz on Hokuto, and even Hokuto says, like, he's fast. And he goes to use the same deflection with his left arm that he used against Kiri when she did her diversion attack. But this time, Natsuki's blade is actually cutting through his armor. So he immediately is able to, like, counter with his blade hand by pushing Natsuki's arm away so he can separate himself from the blade. And then he's then able to try to counterattack to the back, but Natsuki blocks and then proceeds to go for a counterattack of his own towards Hokuto's face. But Hokuto dodges. But then we get, again, this really cool panel of in the background, we have this square that gets cut out of the wall. And then all of a sudden, the wall comes flying at Hokuto's back. And we get to see that it was Kiri who did that. So that's her the second time of just cutting through walls. Last time it was the ceiling. This time it's the wall. Natsuki already cut through the wall. So in that moment, now Hokuto, his retreat in that direction is cut off. So his path is very limited. It kind of reminds me of if anyone has ever watched or read Hunter x Hunter, Gon in the Heaven's Arena, where he's fighting the guy on the wheelchair. I think his name is like Revolt. The guy on the wheelchair, and Gon does his stone flip and throws the stone at him, basically cutting off that path so that Revolt has to go in a direction that he already knows that is his only option. So then he's able to cut him off. And just like Gon in that situation, Natsuki takes full advantage of the fact that Hokuto is now basically stuck between the wall and him. And then he activates his sorcery, which is Lightning Menace. So it's a lightning style sorcery, which is super interesting because his brother, Ibuki, the wielder of the Cloud Gouger, one of the abilities of the Cloud Gouger was Mei, which was a lightning-based sorcery. So it's just very interesting that apparently Natsuki's innate born sorcery would also happen to be part of the Cloud Gouger's like abilities as well. So it's just an interesting situation or coincidence, I guess you would say. But I'm always a huge fan of any lightning type abilities. So, and after the Cloud Gouger was destroyed, I was actually a little bit sad because I was like, oh no, now we're probably not going to see any lightning based, attacks or powers maybe for a while, or if not ever again. But nope, we get it through Natsuki, which I am absolutely cool with. But in that moment, we get to see that Hokuto formed like all these other pieces of armor around his body. So to me, this is really cool because we know he's obviously able to create an entire like entity, like an entire puppet that he can manipulate. Now, it's not very useful against top tier fighters. Like obviously we see what happened to the puppet against Azumi, and he even states himself like the puppet's just not going to cut it with him. Like he's too strong. So when it comes to like top tiers, the actual full autonomous puppet is not that useful. But in this case, for defense, it actually is extremely good because he's able to create additional pieces of armor that protects him. And it seems like he's able to basically freely manipulate it how he sees. So it's kind of like a very cool defensive technique to go along with his obvious exceptional abilities offensively. And that's another thing to kind of note, is that currently this whole chapter, Hokuto is, primarily just playing defense. He is wanting to get information on where Uruha is. And he's literally just playing defense the whole time, which is kind of scary because I think he seems to just be very chill about it. But then now, like, it's one of those characters where you're like, you're just kind of chilling too long for my liking, and it's making me a little unsettled. So, but regardless of the point, I just thought that was really cool, the way he manipulated his armor. So, and it's not just the puppets. So the thing is we get to see then Natsuki has some introspective, like I talked about, where he's focused on Uruha and the fact that Uruha's younger than him, but he feels like Uruha never gave him the respect that he deserves, because he would refer to everyone else as Mr. with the honorific, but for him it was much more like chummy, like we're just buds, or we're both like on the same level, or maybe even views him below him. And Natsuki, like I said, he has a chip on his shoulder. He feels like he hasn't been given his recognition for his abilities because he wasn't selected as an enchanted blade user. And I totally get where he's coming from, because clearly he's put in an excessive amount of effort into his swordsmanship and, his combat ability. But the, enchanted blade wielders were just elevated to such a higher stratosphere because of their role in the Seitei War and the Kamunabi and the government's depiction of, what happened in the war, even though we're starting to get more details on, what actually happened with like the malediction and the sword saint. But, this is something that I feel like Natsuki is going to have to get over, and it's not going to be necessarily through his abilities or what he achieves, because that's what he thinks it is. He thinks it's purely off of his abilities and what he's accomplished. But I think it's going to be more deeper than that. And I think for him, his biggest growths are probably not going to come on the training combat side. It's going to be more so of like the internal side. But then we move on, and actually, again, the ceiling crumbles from above them, and down comes Uruha and Yura. And we have this panel of Hokuto just like starry-eyed, basically, because he's so happy, because like I said, he was obsessed with finding out where Uruha is, and now he's literally falling down right in front of him. But then we have Hokuto, who's so excited to see Uruha, even though he's Hishaku. And then we have Natsuki, who is Kamunabi, technically on the same side as Uruha, and his face is like basically disgusted, because one, he thought that Uruha was dead and was basically like good riddance, because like I said, he has kind of what seems to be a bit of a grudge against him. And Uruha immediately drops down and is like, hey, Natsuki, like, we can win this together, like, with you here. Like, we got, like, immediately to being chummy with him, which just bothers Natsuki even more. But that is actually where the chapter ends. But we have the funny part with the assistant guy for Natsuki. By the end, the running joke apparently for this whole chapter was just the destruction of walls, ceilings, everything, doors, just destruction of the Kamunabi headquarters. And this rando dude is basically like, I give up. Like, I care. Like, clearly you guys are just going to go hog wild anyway, so it doesn't matter. And it's not like they really have a choice. I mean, headquarters is literally being infiltrated by the Hishaku, which is the Kamunabi's #1 enemy. So, sorry, dude. I think that is best that you do give up on the idea that, you know, nothing is going to happen to headquarters. But this is where the chapter ends. I'm really curious to see where this heads into the next one, because we might have an interesting situation where matchups change. We know obviously that Hokuto is adamant on fighting Uruha, and possibly maybe he'll take over that so that Yura can continue on the mission, which we still don't necessarily know what it is, but it seems to be at least what I think is some sort of diversion to basically allow the Sword Saint to break free. I'm of the belief that all the way back to the auction where Yura talks about being able to wield the Shinuchi or the Magatsumi. Because I know in the chapters they usually refer to it as the Shinuchi, but I like to refer to it as the Magatsumi because that's the actual name of the enchanted blade. Shinuchi just literally means like masterpiece. So it's basically just denoting that this is Rokuhira's greatest blade that he made. His is like magnum opus. But I'm going to refer to it in future videos just as the Magatsumi. It seems to me that the Magatsumi is going to make its way back to the Sword Saint and not to Yura. It seems Yura seems to be in cahoots. The Hishaku, most likely their goal is to actually free the Sword Saint. I don't know exactly how they all tie in together, but we're going to have to wait to find that out. So I'm just curious of where the matchups are going to head to, because again, Natsuki doesn't know that Hokuto is his brother's killer, because if he did know, he'd probably want to focus entirely on him. But Hokuto also seems to be powerful enough that he might potentially be able to battle Uruha and Natsuki at the same time. And then that allows Yura to, go do whatever he needs to do. I'm not really sure, but I am extremely excited to see where this, infiltration continues to go. I'm hoping, Azumi hopefully will get brought back into the fold, because now he's got rid of all the threats in the elimination room, and he already knows something is kind of up because that was a puppet that he destroyed of that Hishaku member. So maybe he'll leave the elimination room to try to, go help everybody else. Not sure, but extremely excited for the continuation. And I mean, Kagurabachi has just been a phenomenal journey for me. I've been reading it since, chapter 1 released, when all the memes were going crazy. And honestly, I haven't left it at all. It's been, it's a joke, but it's like it started with a meme and it's just rode that train, and it just continues to build and just get better and better. And, for me, I haven't had this sort of feeling for a newer manga on a week-to-week basis since Jujutsu Kaisen. And, JJK finished and ended and left a hole in my soul. I still plan on talking about JJK on the channel, but Kagurabachi has been helping fill that void a bit. Obviously, it's its own thing and has its own strengths, and I love it for different reasons, but it does scratch a lot of the similar itches that I got from JJK as well. But thank you. I'll just end it here. I could go on for a while just about how great Kagurabachi is, but there's really no need to do that. If you've read it, especially up until this point, you know how good it is. So I would just thank you if you have made it to this point in the video. I greatly appreciate you sticking around, and I'm extremely excited to catch you guys in the next one. Peace out.